I want you to try something right now. Sit back in whatever chair you are in, cross your arms over your chest, and stand up. Just your legs, no hands.
Hey, how did that go?
Yeah.
If you stood up, easily good.
Yeah.
Stay with me because what I am going to share today
will make sure you can still do that 10 years from now. And if you struggled, if your hands moved before you even thought about it, I need you to hear this next part very carefully. That struggle is not old age. That struggle is a message, and messages can be answered. I have spent nearly 3 decades watching people in their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, and I have noticed something that the medical world does not talk about enough. The people who thrive late in life are not the lucky ones. They are not the ones with the best genes or the biggest bank accounts or the children who call every Sunday. They are the ones who paid attention to the small things every single day. And today, over the next 30 minutes, I am going to show you exactly what those small things are. We are going to talk about a man named Frank. He is 87 years old, he lives alone in Vermont, and he has the health markers of a man in his early 50s. His doctor does not quite know what to do with him. We are going to talk about a woman named Martha. She turned 100 years old last spring. She still makes her own breakfast every morning. And we are going to talk about what both of them know, quietly, almost casually, that most people their age were never told. But first, I need to tell you about the day everything changed for a woman named Helen. Because Helen's story is probably closer to your story than you realize. And what happened to Helen, I have been saving this for the right moment, is the part of today that I think is going to stay with you long after this video ends. Stay with me. Let me ask you something honest. When did getting through the day start to feel like work? Not dramatic work, not crisis, just effort. The kind of effort that was not there 10 years ago. The kind that crept in so gradually that you almost did not notice it arriving. You started holding the railing on the stairs, not because anything happened, just because it felt safer. You started parking closer to the entrance. You stopped bending down to pick things up in one smooth motion. You started sitting on the edge of the bed in the morning for a minute before you stood up, waiting for your body to agree that today was happening. And the strange part is, nobody warned you about this part. Nobody sat you down and said, listen, there will come a morning when getting up feels different, when the body you've lived in your whole life starts to feel like it belongs to someone slightly older than you feel inside. Nobody warned you it would feel like this. And because nobody warned you, you did what most people do. You adapted. Quietly. Without telling anyone. You found workarounds. Small ones. Invisible ones. The kind that feel sensible in the moment, but add up to something significant over time. Here, in America, we have a particular way of handling this. We push through, we do not complain. We pour our coffee, we get on with the day, we tell ourselves we are fine. And sometimes we are fine, but sometimes fine is just the word we use when we are not ready to look at something more honestly. And what I want to offer you today, not as a lecture, not as a warning, but as a genuine conversation between two people who both understand that time moves in one direction, is this. The small things you do between the time you wake up and the time you go to sleep are not small at all. They are everything. They are the difference between the person who is still walking their own neighborhood at 83 and the person who is not. They are the difference between Frank, 87, living alone, tending his garden, and the version of Frank that almost happened. And I want to tell you about both versions. But first, I want to tell you about Helen. Because Helen, at 72 years old, thought she was fine too. Helen Williams was 72 years old. She lived in a house she had lived in for 41 years, in a neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, where she knew every crack in every sidewalk. She had raised 3 children in that house. She had buried her husband in the winter of 2019, and she had continued, as she always had, to manage. She was not a woman who asked for help. She had her routines. Coffee at 6:30, the news at 7, a walk around the block when the weather allowed, sometime before lunch. She kept her home clean. She cooked real meals. She called her daughter Carol on every Sunday at 4 p.m. Always Carol who answered. Always the same easy conversation. Always ending with, I'm fine, honey. Everything is fine. She was fine. Except, there was the morning she dropped her reading glasses. They fell between the couch and the side table. Not far, maybe 8 inches of space. And Helen stood there looking at them for what she would later describe as a long moment. Longer than it should have been. Because getting down there to retrieve them, she was not sure she could get back up. She was not sure. So she left them there. She read the morning paper without her glasses that day, holding it further away, squinting at the headlines. And she told herself it was fine. She would get them later. She would figure it out. That was a Tuesday. By Thursday, she had still not retrieved the glasses. On Friday, her neighbor Bob, 78 himself, a widower with kind eyes and a bad hip, came by with some tomatoes from his garden. And he noticed the glasses on the floor. And without saying anything about it, he bent down and picked them up and set them on the table. And Helen felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt ashamed. Not because of Bob. Bob was the gentlest man she knew. But because in that moment, she understood something she had been quietly understanding for months without letting it fully form. She was shrinking. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would necessarily notice, but her world was getting smaller. The things she avoided were becoming more numerous. The adjustments were accumulating. She sat down at her kitchen table after Bob left, the same table where she had helped with 40 years of homework and hosted 20 years of Thanksgiving dinners, and she thought about what her life looked like from the outside. And she thought about what it might look like in 5 years if nothing changed. And for the first time in a long time, Helen Williams cried. Not from self-pity, from honesty. And what happened after that, what Helen did with that moment of honesty, is the part I have been waiting to tell you. Because what she did was so simple and so completely within reach of anyone watching this right now. Stay with me. Helen did not join a gym. She did not hire a trainer. She did not buy equipment or research programs or call her doctor and ask for a referral. What Helen did was this. The morning after she cried at her kitchen table, she woke up at her usual time. She poured her coffee. She sat in her usual chair. And then she stood up, without using her hands. It took her 3 tries. On the 3rd try, she made it. And she stood there in her kitchen in Columbus, Ohio at 6:45 a.m. in the morning, and she said aloud to nobody, to herself, to the room, there. That was it. That was the whole beginning. 1 chair, 1 morning, no hands. And she did it again the next day, and the day after that. 3 weeks later, she got down on the floor of her living room for the first time in years, slowly, carefully, with the couch right there if she needed it. And she sat on the carpet, and she stayed there for 10 minutes, and she got back up. And the following Saturday, her granddaughter Lily came to visit. Lily was 6 years old and had an elaborate set of building blocks and an absolute expectation that her grandmother would sit on the floor with her. And Helen sat on the floor with her. That's the moment I want you to hold on to. Not the exercise, not the routine, the flow, the 6-year-old, the blocks. Because that's what we are actually talking about today. We are not talking about fitness. We are not talking about longevity in the abstract clinical sense of living longer. We are talking about what you live longer for. We are talking about the flow moments, the unplanned Tuesday morning moments, the moments that require a body that still works, that still responds, that still says yes when life asks something of it. And here's the truth that Frank knows, that Martha knows, that Helen learned on her kitchen floor that Tuesday morning. Your body does not need to be young. It needs to be asked. That's the whole insight. Quietly, I want to say that again, because I think it's the thing most people are never told. Your body does not need to be young. It needs to be asked. Every time you ask it to do something, stand without hands, walk a little faster, balance on 1 foot while you wait for the kettle, it responds. Maybe slowly, maybe imperfectly, but it responds. And every time you stop asking, every time you take the easier path, find the workaround, let the glasses stay on the floor, it quietly adjusts to being asked less. That's not failure, that's biology. It's the body being efficient. Your job is to keep making the demand. Small demands, consistent demands, daily demands. And here's what I want you to sit with for a moment before we go further. You do not have to do this perfectly. You do not have to do this dramatically. You just have to do it today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. Let that sit. You do not need to do anything with it right this second. But there is something I want to come back to before we finish today. Something that ties everything we are talking about together in a way I think is going to surprise you. I will get there. Stay with me. Now let me tell you about Frank. Because Frank figured this out at 63, and what his mornings look like, what he has been quietly doing every single day for 24 years, is one of the most practical and human things I have ever come across. Frank Callahan is 87 years old. He lives alone in a small house outside Burlington, Vermont. He has a wood stove, a modest garden, and a physician who, Frank will tell you, with considerable satisfaction, has run out of things to worry about. Frank's morning takes 47 minutes. Not because he planned it that way, not because he read it in a book, but because over 24 years of paying attention to his own body, he found the rhythm that works, and it has 47 minutes in it. I'm going to share it with you, not as a prescription, not as something you must replicate exactly, but as an invitation, and you will know better than I do which parts belong in your life. Frank begins before he stands up. He lies on his back with 2 pillows under his knees for 7 minutes. This sounds almost too simple to mention, but here is what it does. Overnight, your spinal discs compress. You're actually slightly shorter when you wake up than when you went to bed. If you stand up immediately and start bending and moving, you're compressing discs that have not yet had the chance to rehydrate. 7 minutes. Pillows under the knees. Let the spine decompress. Frank says it is the reason he has not had back pain in 15 years. I cannot promise you that, but I can tell you it costs nothing and takes 7 minutes, and the research on spinal hydration is genuinely compelling. After that, Frank sits on the edge of his bed and flexes his feet. Just his feet, up and down 10 times. It sounds almost embarrassingly small, but this movement, before you stand, before you transfer your weight to your legs, primes your circulation. It is one of the reasons older people get dizzy when they stand up too quickly. The blood has pooled overnight. You flex your feet, you get it moving gently, you stand up with a steadier head. Then Frank does 8 minutes of joint rotations. Ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, neck. Slow circles. Nothing dramatic. He does it in the kitchen while his coffee brews. He says, and I find this genuinely charming, that he sounds like a bowl of breakfast cereal, all snap and crackle. But he does it anyway.
Now, here is the one I have been saving, and I think this might be the most important part of everything we are talking about today. Frank stands on one leg while he waits for his coffee. That's it. That's the whole thing. One leg every morning for however long the coffee takes. He does not time it. He does not count. He just stands at his kitchen counter with one foot slightly off the ground and lets his body work. Because here is what that single habit does. It trains three systems simultaneously. Your inner ear balance, your visual spatial awareness, and the small stabilizing muscles in your ankle that most people lose entirely without ever realizing it. The research on one-legged balance in people over 70 is genuinely striking. The ability to hold it for 10 seconds correlates with significantly lower mortality risk. Not because standing on one leg keeps you alive, but because the systems required to do it are the same systems that catch you when you stumble on an uneven sidewalk. You do not fall when you trip. You fall when you trip and your body cannot recover. That recovery lives in the seconds you spend at your kitchen counter every morning. And before I move on, I want to acknowledge something. Maybe some of what I'm describing sounds manageable but also slightly lonely. A person alone in a kitchen standing on one foot while coffee brews. And maybe for some of you, that image lands with a weight I did not entirely intend. Because you used to have someone in that kitchen with you. You used to have someone who would have laughed about the cereal bowl joints. I'm not going to move past that too quickly. I just want you to know I know that part is real. We'll come back to it. Now I want to come back to something I promised you earlier. I told you there was something that tied all of this together. Something I wanted to return to before we finished. Here it is. Martha Reed turned 100 years old last April. She lives in a small apartment in Savannah, Georgia. Her granddaughter Rachel checks in every day. Her great-grandchildren visit on Sundays. She makes her own breakfast every morning. Oatmeal, a sliced banana, black coffee that her doctor has given up arguing about. And someone asked Martha recently, what is the secret? What is the one thing? Martha thought about it for a moment and she said, I never let my world get smaller than I let it. She said it simply, like it was obvious, like it was something everyone knew. I never let my world get smaller than I let it. What she meant, what she has lived for 100 years is this. Every time life offered her a reason to pull back, to simplify, to stop doing something, to avoid something, to let something go, she looked at it carefully, and she decided whether she was letting it go because it no longer served her or because she was afraid. And if it was fear, she kept doing the thing. Not recklessly, not without wisdom, but she kept doing the thing. She kept getting on the floor with the grandchildren. She kept walking to the end of the block even when the end of the block felt far. She kept calling the friend she wasn't sure would want to hear from her. She kept being a person who took up space in the world. And here is where I want to speak to you directly for a moment. Not to the general audience, to you. The one watching this, maybe alone, maybe in the early morning before the house gets complicated. You've been doing something quietly remarkable. You've been adapting, adjusting, finding ways to keep going without making a fuss. And that resilience, that particular kind of quiet toughness that does not announce itself, is one of the most genuinely impressive things a human being can do. But I want to offer you one gentle thing alongside that. You do not have to adapt to less. You can adapt towards more. Not more effort, not more striving, but more presence, more floor time with grandchildren, more mornings where you stand at the kitchen counter on one foot and feel quietly like someone who is still in charge of their own life. And maybe, I want to say this carefully, maybe part of what I'm describing has made some of this harder is that you've been doing it without the person you used to do everything with. And nobody talks about that part. Nobody talks about how much of your daily energy goes towards things that used to be shared. How the mornings that used to have conversation in them are now just you and the coffee and the news. How the small victories, standing up without hands, making it to the end of the block, have no one to quietly notice them. I'm not going to fix that today. I wouldn't insult you by trying. But I want you to know, I know that part is there. And it matters, and it's not weakness. It's love with nowhere to go in the morning. And that's one of the most human things that exists. You're still here. You're still asking your body to show up. You're still choosing the floor over the chair. Helen is still here. She sat on the floor last Christmas and built an entire city out of blocks with her granddaughter Lily, while her daughter Carol watched from the couch and tried to cry. Frank is still here. He stood on one foot this morning while his coffee brewed. Same as every morning for 24 years. Martha is still here. She made her own breakfast today. And you are still here, watching, paying attention, choosing not to let your world get smaller than you let it. That's not a small thing. That's everything. You are not just surviving this season of life. You are still writing it. And the chapters ahead of you, I believe this with everything I have, are still worth writing well. Before we finish today, I want to leave you with something practical to carry into tomorrow morning. Test yourself gently against what we talked about. Try the chair, cross your arms, stand up. Try one foot at the kitchen counter while the coffee brews. Try the floor, just sitting on it, near something sturdy for 5 minutes. Not as a test you can fail, as a conversation with your body. Ask it something, see what it says back. And next time, I want to sit with you on something that almost never gets talked about in conversations like this one. It's not about the body. It's about something quieter. Something I think has been sitting in the corner of your mind for a while now, on the days when the house is very still and the afternoon is very long. I think it is going to mean something to you. Take care of yourself between now and then. Move a little, rest well, call someone you've been meaning to call. You already know who it is. And remember this, you are not invisible here. Don't forget to subscribe to get more elderly advice on aging happily.